What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the dive that we did at Roubidoux Spring Cave in Waynesville, Missouri. It is about an hour west of St. Louis. It's a really cool cave system. It goes back a really long way, several thousand feet, if not more. And it is deep. Most of it is beyond 140 feet. This is a close-up of the entrance or the beginning of the cave system. The cavern zone is fairly large. There's about a couple hundred feet to the drop-off, and then you go down a steep slope and get down to the deep section. In order to dive there, you have to register at the Pulaski County 911 Communication Center. Just Google that in Missouri and you'll get the address. You just drive up there, let them know you're going to be diving. They take a copy of your driver's license and your certification card. And if needed, they will give you a key to access the little access road down to the bottom of the cave system so you can drop all your things off like we did here. Just quick side note. If you're watching and not just listening to me ramble on, this is me trying to get my Sidewinder on. If I was going to say there was one drawback to this rebreather system, it's that it is difficult to put on when weighted for a dry suit, at least for me. In side mount, there I am losing my balance. It's always very comical to watch me put it on. It oftentimes draws a crowd. It does draw a crowd, and everyone gets a kick out of it. But I still love it. I'm just going to keep diving it. For me, in a dry suit, I need about 28 pounds of lead. With the BC and the full canisters and the O2 bottle, that thing's probably close to 60 pounds, I would say. I've never weighed it, but it is heavy. That's normally the easiest way for me to get it on, is to just lay it down and lean back and wiggle my way in. Once I have one arm in, I can get the other one in fairly easily. But like I said, there's pros and cons to everything. That I would say is probably the one con for this system, at least in my opinion. So back to Roubidoux. Yeah, so they have a check-in system at the dispatch center. They use that location because they're open 24 hours a day. However, they do generally want divers out of the water before dark. They told us to make it up there before dark. But we'd gotten there a little bit late. It was our second dive of the day. And we told them that wasn't going to be possible, and they were fine with it. They just wanted us out of the cave before dark, and we just made it out. So there is a cavern zone here. I believe cavern divers are allowed to dive it. It's fairly large, much larger than I expected. As a matter of fact, the Grim Reaper stop sign was quite a bit further away than I had anticipated, and I ended up having to tie two spools together because I didn't run my big reel, thinking it was going to be like 20, 30, 40 feet from the entrance. That was not the case. I think some of the videos that I have seen of this system were a little bit deceiving. It seems like there always appear to be a line right at the entrance in the videos that I've seen. Maybe it's hard to gauge things in videos in places you've never been to, but I totally had the wrong impression of where it was and used the wrong line to run the tie off from the exit to the main line. But we figured it out. and continued on with the dive. As far as this spring, um, it's not that hard to find like some of the other ones that are in much more remote locations. This is within the city limits of Waynesville. I read online that it's a second magnitude spring system. There's quite a bit of water that comes out of it. This is the entrance to the drop-off. It's only a couple 100 feet, I believe, and has an average depth of about 50 feet. Not a whole lot to say about that first section. The entrance itself is really, really rocky, which is a good thing because this thing has some flow. We were fighting to get inside. It was just grab onto a big boulder, pull in, and then grab onto another big boulder. Again, some of the videos that I've seen, people just very leisurely swim in it inside. That was not the case when we went a few weeks ago. It was it was a struggle. I kept fighting to get in there so much that I kept kicking my tanks loose off of the bungees. Luckily, I always use double enders to as kind of a backup, so they didn't hang down horrendously bad, but they kept coming off, so I just left them hanging until we made it the rest of the way in. Unfortunately, because of the current and me fighting with that spool, buoyancy was a little bit off on the entrance. Again, fortunately, it's mostly all big boulders, so it wasn't there was no concern with silting anything out or anything like that. But definitely something to consider. That flow is going to get you if you've never been there. It's and just anticipate it and you'll be fine. We totally were not expecting it to be that bad. Like I said, based off of other videos that we've seen. But again, we quickly realized and noticed that the cave started or went to the left. We kind of had an idea just by looking at the cave map, but everything on paper looks completely different than when you're actually in there. But it's a very obvious opening and entrance, and then about another 50 feet past the boulders, you find the cave sign. Just behind that barrel is where the main line is tied off. So that is where I put the second spool that I took out to run a line over there. The first one ran out of line, so I had to tie the second one. Could have been avoided. Next time I'll run my big reel to the main line, and we'll avoid a lot of the issues that we had getting in here and running the line here to the tie-off point. Once we got here, it was pretty smooth sailing. From this point on, it does get quite a bit siltier. There's less big boulders and more silt on the ground on the bottom. Definitely need to be more concerned with maintaining your buoyancy and using the proper finning techniques and so on, so you don't run into silt out issues or conditions. As I said, it is still quite a bit of flow, but I have found that some of the very fine silt, while it does have a tendency to work its way out, it takes quite a bit of time just because it lingers in the water, even with flow. The heavier, grittier, sandier silt tends to just because it has more mass, it tends to blow out or sink back down to the bottom much quicker. The fine stuff does not. It will just fog everything out pretty bad, and then still stay there. So definitely be aware of that, and be mindful of your buoyancy and finning. Again, once you get to the cave sign, there's not a whole lot of distance to the drop off, and the drop off again is not like a tunnel or a steep just hole that goes straight down. It wraps around to the left on a pretty good slope, a pretty steep slope, and drops, and then the depth increases pretty quickly from that point. The average depth is about 50 feet, if I didn't already mention that, at the entrance back to the beginning of the drop. And then like I said, it drops off pretty quickly, down to about 130 feet, I believe, is where the overhang is, where it gets small again, gets kind of like the entrance to the cave system. It's only several feet top to bottom. So anytime it pinches off like that, it's the flow it just increases exponentially. Here we're just kind of leisurely swimming against it, but once you get down to 130 feet into that restriction, it's not so much a restriction for us in terms of us not being able to squeeze through it easily. It's just restricting the water flow, and it starts to come out of there pretty rapidly. You'll see once I get to that point, I actually don't choose the best way to swim in there, and I get fatigued and I stop kicking, and I just start floating backwards right into my dive buddy Charlie. And the whole time he's looking at me like, why are you swimming back towards me? He had not realized how bad the flow was coming out of there just yet, but he realized it soon enough. And then, we repositioned ourselves and took the far left side, and we used the overhang to block the flow, and then came down at the last minute, or came past the overhang at the last minute, dropped down, kicked furiously until we managed to grab a giant boulder where the line was tied off, and took a minute to compose ourselves. And then once we pulled in from that point, it became a little bit more manageable, but I was not going to overbreathe my rebreather, so I kept the kicking to a minimum and kind of used the pull and glide technique most of the time down there. Here, if you saw, Charlie was kind of shining his light at the line and then shining it up at me. Right there below him were line markers for a jump. I'm not sure where that leads to, because the cave system doesn't appear to have any other rooms based off of the map, but it is pretty wide there, so maybe the jump is just to go explore another section over there. We didn't try it, but nonetheless, there were jump markers there, and he saw me take a right, and he didn't know if I was going to look for the secondary line or what I was doing, so he held back and then eventually ran a reel back to the main line, not knowing that I was following the main line. We figured it out, and then talked about it after the fact, and he did the right thing. He didn't see the line go that way. I did, and he ran the line from those two jump markers to the main line. Here we're going down the slope, and just reached the that overhang that I mentioned. This is about 130 feet right at the entrance. I think Charlie's computer or his camera says 125 just above it. And then that is the path that we took through the deep tunnel, towards the Witchway Tunnel, I guess it's called. But this is my first attempt trying to go in. I failed miserably. I got right to the entrance. I got a little bit winded, and I said, "This is more work than I want it to be right now." So I stopped kicking and immediately just started floating back into Charlie. A couple fin kicks later, I was over on top of the overhang again, out of the flow, and took a better look at it now that I know that there was flow coming out, and came up with a game plan. So this is what we ended up doing. At the left side of the entrance, we came out over the overhang at the last minute at the deepest point that we could. Looks like his camera says 133 feet. And then just grabbed onto the biggest rock we could find and started working our way in. The flow, like I said here, it got a little bit better once past the entrance, but it was still pretty bad. Like I said, to the point where it was just easier to grab onto the big boulders and pull your way through. I don't suspect it's this bad all the time, but it definitely proved to be a challenge. I didn't get a whole lot of video, or any video actually, going in there because I needed my hands to pull my way through. But when we got a couple 100 feet in, I decided that we had gone in far enough, even though we didn't reach our time that I had planned on making it in there. And I'll make another video on how we came up with our gas plan. I was going to do it in this video, and I actually started recording it, but by the time I got about halfway through the explanation, the video was about to end. So I didn't want to rush through it. It is pretty detailed, and I think I'll just do a whole separate video on how I do my gas planning and stuff like that, especially for places that I've never been to. Oftentimes you use your past experience to determine how much gas you're going to need for bailout purposes, but we had never been here, so I got to go based off of the math, and that can get pretty boring and a little bit complicated. So I'll do that in another video if there's any interest for it, or I might just do it just for my own excuse me, for my own enjoyment, I guess, because I like mathy stuff. But anyhow, so as we were coming out from the deep tunnel, the flow was so bad that I ended up getting pushed past Charlie, who hadn't gotten turned around yet, and ended up in front of him. Generally, the second diver is the lead diver on the way out. We had not planned on changing positions at the turnaround point, so I went ahead and let him pass me once we came back out onto the slope leading up to the shallow section. So there he is coming up. I think I pass a line marker. I might have passed it already. That's about 400 feet. Yeah, there it is. So here we're still on the slope. It says 400 feet. I don't know if that line marker is marked correctly. I remember looking at this map and thinking it was only like 300 feet halfway down that slope based off of the scale. But, who knows? That line marker could have been moved or misplaced. I don't know. It just didn't seem like it was 400 feet there, but I don't plan on, again, I'll talk more about my dive planning, how I do it in another video, but I don't plan on depth penetration anyway. I plan on time based off of available gas. So here we're working our way out, and we are going to reach the spot where Charlie had tied off his jump reel. I think he realizes very quickly that we had not jumped off of the main line, that we had still been following the main line. But as I mentioned before, you never want to leave the main line without a continuous guideline back to it. And he did not see where it turned, made that hard right. And the visibility wasn't great, as I had said earlier. So he did what we were trained to do, and that was he ran a line from the 2 jump markers across to what ultimately was the main line again. He picked up his reel, and we kept on working our way out. No real time loss there, so we get. The funny thing is when he takes the line off of the main line, he looks at me like he wants to explain why that reel is there, but I think he decides that that was not the appropriate time to do it, so he just turns around and starts working his way out. It is a really cool cave system. It's not a tight one. But what it lacks in restrictions, it makes up in flow and in depth, which adds to the technicality of diving a cave system like this. If again, not wanting to get into all of the details of planning bailout gas and having a plan. In this video, it is, I will say that it is really easy to get in trouble in dives like this if you're not planning accordingly. There's a lot of nuances that go along with deep dives, not just cave dives, deep dives in general. And then you add a lot more to that when you start diving rebreathers. They are, self-contained nitrox mixing machines on your back, and it could be very easy to get lost in just how amazing they are when it comes to bottom time and run times and stuff like that. Because I think if you lose sight of the potential dangers, if it's a machine, and like anything else, it can fail. And if you don't plan for that accordingly, it could be bad. This was a fairly short dive in comparison to other dives that we've done, but just because of the depth, and it's not even like really great depths. It was 144 feet, I think, was our max depth. But just being there for the 10-15 minutes that we were there, we racked up quite a bit of deco. And if you don't have the gas to bail out during decompression, and which extends your bottom time, your time in the water pretty extensively in some cases, you could run into a lot of trouble. And again, I'll talk about that in another video. So this was our total dive from entrance to our turning point. And then this next slide is the basically the stats for it: max depth, average depth, start and end times, and 51-minute dive it turned out to be. Nice thing about this one is we ended up working out most of our deco just coming out, watching our ceiling and making sure we didn't exceed that. But I think all in all, we ended up spending like 5 minutes decompressing, in one spot and not moving towards the exit. But that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about this particular location, please let me know. I will answer it in the comments. And I will try to get that gas planning video out sooner than later. Thanks for watching, and till the next one. Thanks, guys.